Nothing's clear.
And we're back in Dune universe with Dune Part 2, which is now in cinemas. This time we are reunited with Paul and Chani, the love of his life, as they try to seek revenge against the Harkonnens, the house that destroyed their parents in the first film. However, things are a bit complicated because Paul also can foresee his future and it doesn't look very good. Okay, Mr. Baz, how are you doing?
Very good. How are you, Alex?
Very good, very good. Managed to see it in the end.
Yes.
Excellent viewing. But tell me, what were your first impressions? You walked into the cinema, film started, first 20 minutes. How did it make you feel?
Very excited. You just going in, I think it was an anticipation in the air that everyone knew that this was going to be a big one, an epic one, because of its predecessor, And
Yes.
within the first 20 minutes, it already lived up to the kind of hype. It opened with a big tension set piece in the dunes in the desert of Paul versus the Harkonnen and how scarifying and a bit stormtrooperish they look. So it definitely lived up to the hype, I would say, and it managed to kind of carry that through the 2 hours and 45 minutes, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it does, and it does take you right back in it, because it starts with Princess, what's her name, Florence Pugh plays her, narrating, where almost like, previously on Dune, it was almost a section of...
it just kind of takes off from
just
the last
happened.
movie,
Yeah, but it just takes you right back in the universe, which is what I liked. It feels like you're back in there, you're back in the world, and then settle in for a ride. I also enjoyed the fact that the cinema was packed. I watched it in IMAX and it was an 11 o'clock in the morning viewing and it was packed. I was like, yes, that's what we want more. So
on the opposite, I went at 9 o'clock on a Sunday and even the cinema was half full then. So it kind of just shows the popularity of this film was crazy high, I'd say.
Yeah. Right, Mr. Baz, so tell me about what did you thought of the story? Because, it's been a year and a bit since we've seen Dune. I haven't read the books. I don't think you've read the books either. So we went in completely blind on the story. Tell me a little about, did you manage to caught up quickly and get to know where you are? And
So I think the three main characters I wouldn't be disputed. Obviously, you have Paul Atreides, don't you? And he's kind of strive for... He's very humble as a character, but there's a big fate looming on him, it's almost like he can't escape his fate of leadership and, potential to rule the universe in which he lives, really. It's almost like that's destined upon him. So it's kind of like a superhero story in that regard, but he has his humble way about him, which you do see change throughout the course of the film, don't you? He kind of goes from this, wanting to play a smaller part and staying in shadows to this kind of raging kind of supreme leader almost, really. You see quite a good arc of that happening, and then obviously alongside that you have the love interest of Chani, I think we're pronouncing that correctly. It almost sounds a bit like Johnny in the film, so that's the love interest which kind of started at the end of the last film as well. So you have her alongside him, and she kind of roots him, I think, to it grounds him almost in the film, really, and he remembers that he has to stay in touch with his humanistic side, and actually there is some love in the world and what have you. So he's kind of got this battle inside his head with this love interest, as well as does he need to save the fate of the universe that he lives in, really.
It's almost like the sense of duty.
Yeah, sense of duty. Yeah, that's well said, actually. Over his own family, even, or his own love. What did you think of Jessica's role in the film, played by Rebecca Ferguson? Did you think that was a role that was needed in the film, or because it had quite a lot of screen time?
To be honest, I was hoping it was a lot of screen time, because the trailer doesn't reveal that much, but she's actually she's a very important figure as a like a Bene Gesserit order, because she's manipulating everything. She's almost like religion, represents religion, because she becomes this Reverend Mother within the Freeman, and the Reverend Mother is almost like the highest religious job you can have in a religious institution. And she's in a position of power whereby she can manipulate the opinions, basically, and then she helps fuel this impression or image of her son being the chosen one, the prophet that will bring freedom to the whole planet of Arrakis, where they are. And it's a very interesting, because she plays it very well, to be honest, because she's pregnant too, and she uses her child as if, to ask questions that she can't ask herself. She says, oh, my daughter in my belly wants to ask this question and wants to think about this. It's a very interesting one, and actually comes into conflict with her son, with Paul, at one point, because all Paul wants to do is just be a Freeman and live with his love of his life on the planet, not get involved in any war. He wants to exert revenge. He wants to get the Harkonnens, to get them killed because of what they did in part one. But he doesn't want to go any further than that. And he keeps seeing this. He keeps seeing that he's going to get far. But the consequences of that are going to be immense. So I think all these three characters, that's what I like, that it takes its time to build the arcs of each character, which is exactly what you want. You don't want to be flooded with visual stuff. You just want story and characters.
And did you think that Javier Bardem played quite a good role in? It was almost kind of like Paul's tutor, almost a little bit, wasn't it? And it was almost his kind of spirit guide on his journey, wasn't it? And someone who had faith in him and pushed him.
Javier just represents the fanatic, almost. He's not crazy, he's not like doing anything, but he is the fanatic of any religion, just like any religion has. He believes blindly in Paul's future. He believes he's the chosen one, he's there, he's willing to give his life for him, and he stirs up the crowd. So he's almost like a pawn in Jessica's chessboard play, basically. So and they're all actually, look, just every single one of them, even these supporting characters, you can see them participating in the whole of the story, which is, I found, very unique in this film altogether. I think compared to the first part, we are looking at a little bit more of a tempered type of film when it comes to how much of the visuals, of how much spectacle is thrown at you. I think it's a bit better paced, to be honest. There's not a lot of like incredibly epic scenes. There are there, but not as I felt they're not as important or as in your face as in the first film. But what did you think about the overall looks and where these scenes are planted in the film?
I think the overall visual of the film is quite beautiful. It's quite, they use kind of like almost like dull pastel colours a lot. They get the mood of the film right, especially the scenes of the Harkonnen and spacecraft. Harkonnen, sorry, yes, and their spacecraft and their world, and it's very. I mean, I think we mentioned that they kind of looks like it's like the engineers out of Prometheus and their kind of home world, really. But they get the dismal kind of military kind of feel to their livelihoods and what have you, and then with the Freemen and the desert dune lands and the presence of the sun. Again, it has some quite spectacle shots, but this film was more based on a linear storyline than shall we say the first one, in terms of the epic scenery. If you're comparing the two films, that is, I mean, if you're just comparing this on its own, it's still pretty epic, but just maybe not as much as the first one, shall we say. Maybe the first one had to drag in the audience by the way it looked. And alongside, it's Hans Zimmer, I think, who did the soundtrack, isn't it? Alongside his music, it really just pairs up nicely. But what did you feel?
I agree. I mean, it feels like this time the visuals are complementing the story instead of the other way around in the first. It just feels like pay attention to what's happening, make sure you understand the characters and the world. And again, this is from a person that hasn't read the book, so I wasn't expecting, I didn't know what to expect from, I didn't know, I had any clues where the story is going. So it's always like, you know, understand the world, understand the characters in it. So there's a scene that is black and white, a good probably 15 minutes of a scene in the middle that is completely black and white when is the battle. You know, remember the gladiator type battle on the Harkonnen planet?
Yes, I do.
Well, it turns out that this is something that I've seen in an interview with the director, Denis Villeneuve. It turns out that they did that because, you know, we are expected, because our planet is a solar planet, you know, you get light from the sun, you get the colors and the reflections and all of that. What if other planets are not like that? What if they're generally in the dark and they only have one source of a different light, which makes everything look black and white? And I was like, that's such a attention to detail to do that. And again, tells the story of these Harkonnens, because they're all white, pale, completely. You've seen that, so maybe that's why they're like
soulless.
That. So it represents who they are, soulless, but it's also maybe it's a consequence of where they live on the planet where they live, with a different type of light. Maybe it's a moonlight all the time instead of a solar light. And that attention to detail is what I liked, is because it's almost like the story in the visuals that you see. And yes, there is battles, and yes, there are fights at the end, which are even more gripping because you care for these characters. But I liked the balance of it, and almost like, don't throw a lot of explosions at the screen just to keep people awake in the cinema. Just hook them with the characters instead of relying on the visuals.
Yeah. I think we also both agreed that the worm scenes in general were pretty fantastic to look at, especially the worm riding, which I think I've heard that they go quite a lot about in the books. So for people who have read the books, it's good to see it visualized.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely agreed. Yeah. Okay, I think this film is pretty important when it comes to what sci-fi is and has been, and mainly because it does that thing well where, you know, you're watching the story and you're watching the visuals and everything, and you're caring for these characters and what happens to them, but underneath there's almost a continuous subtextual storyline when it comes to what Paul represents. And, you know, he looks like a prophet, doesn't he? He's almost like developing, growing into a prophet, isn't it, Baz?
Yeah. I'd agree in that. It's kind of like you know, he looks like a savior of some sort, doesn't he? You know, he looks like they refer to him sometimes as, you know, the chosen one, don't they?
Yes.
But he's kind of got that kind of aura about him, you know, and you know, he's here for the people, and that's it, you know, and just, you know, there's some kind of I guess you could say similarities, there's some sort of similes with the Dune world and maybe our own you know, political affairs and what have you, because I think when we watched the first Dune, we kind of commented on the fact that, you know, the Harkonnen are kind of like it's almost like the Iraq invasion, isn't it, by the US and what have you, and this kind of goes back to like Avatar as well, because I think a few people commented on Avatar and the destruction of the natural world, maybe by the West, and how that kind of articulates that in a film, and that's kind of, you could claim that's what the Dune series is doing as well with the two films that have been released. You know, with the kind of extraction of this spice material. I guess you could replace oil instead of that if you look in our own world.
Well, to be honest, this is where the mother also comes into play, because she represents that religious leader that just manipulates everybody according to what the prophecy needs to be, almost like. So the prophecy is, my son is the chosen one, he's going to save all of you, and you just have to go and convince everybody else. There's actually a scene where she tells her followers, which is like a group of women, and she just goes, why don't you just go and tell everybody about this miracle of my son that it is. And it sounds so very familiar to religions in the world today, or to the formation of religions in history, which is why this film is so impactful, because it takes the sci-fi where story serves first. Story is the main priority, and there's not a lot of sci-fi like that out there. besides the fact that it looks fantastic, but this has a really strong story. And the last one I can remember is maybe the Star Wars, which is like the Empire Strikes Back, when it had an important story behind all the visuals and all the action and all of that. So it is important, and to be honest, unfortunately for any future sci-fi films, this will be a point of reference. Is it always going to be like, is it better than Dune? Is it better than Dune? And it's like, well, I don't know. But it's only, we are the benefit, the audience is going to benefit from a film like this being so good. It's just going to push the standards up, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and as you say, it kind of like sets the benchmark, doesn't it? Now, and it's a hell of a tough standard to beat. But you know, that's why what we want in film, isn't it? We want directors to keep outdoing each other. So it's a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.